my insecurity about not knowing how to be a friend. I looked to my dad because I never really saw my dad have close friendships. I went through a period where I lost grace for my dad, where I was like, oh, why was he that way? And then I was like, oh, he's a flawed human being just like me. It's hard to be objective about your own parenting because my default is to pretty much fall into a position of feeling guilty about everything.
You are listening to the Akkeri Podcast, a show about men and masculinities, the challenges that modern men face, and how to chart a better way forward. I'm your host, Matt Howlett, mental health coach and founder of the Akkeri. This episode is a conversation I had with a longtime friend, Matthew Denis, about our relationships with our fathers. We talk about the societal and cultural expectations they likely experienced, the important role of grace and empathy, as well as Matt's own experience in fathering two teenage girls. And if you stick around to the end, you just might get a behind-the-scenes look at why I like this guy so much, even if he did forget the name of the podcast. Just start by giving me a little bit of an idea, paint a little picture for us, if you will, of what it was like to be Matt Denis, growing up just outside Sherwood Park, Alberta, living on the acreage.
I think from a objective standpoint, especially like now being a dad and seeing, or I guess all the desires I have for my own children, I look at my childhood and I think, oh, it's such an idyllic childhood. I grew up in the country. I have parents who weren't divorced. And it's like, okay, you got all this space. And that's what I think about for my kids. I'm like, oh, well, do they have space to play? Do they have space to explore? Even though they're 13 and 15 now. And I don't know how much of that they're going to do. But when I see them doing it, it warms my heart, right? Like, that's what I want. I want them to this is like my ideal view for my children is like, just go in the trees and explore and play and make up games and stuff. And they do sometimes. And I'm like, oh, that's the greatest. And so when I look at my childhood, I'm like, oh, all that was available and everything. But when you're a kid, you don't see it that way. You see, like, I think I was lonely a lot. Not because my parents didn't pay attention to me. Like, my mom was extremely attentive. She was a stay-at-home mom, so she was always there. And my dad was away a lot because he worked shift work as a police officer. So I didn't see him a ton, or I don't have a lot of memories of us doing things together kind of on the Saturday afternoon or after the day was over. But I was lonely a lot, I think, because there just weren't a lot of kids near me. We were in the middle of nowhere. And I believe, and my mom would never say this, but I think I was probably a challenging kid for other kids to be around when I was young.
Okay.
I didn't know how to be a good friend. It took me a long time to understand how to not always be seeing myself through the eyes of the other person that I'm with, and always be kind of responding from a place of insecurity of, are they going to like me if I do this? Or if they come over to my house, do I have enough things for them to do to keep them entertained? I never really saw myself as being enough. And even in an early childhood relationship, I always kind of felt insecure in that. So I think with that, I'd be kind of someone who probably took energy as a kid. People probably felt my anxiety. I'm speculating. Sure. I don't know for sure.
Where do you think that would have come from? Like, is it partly just due to the fact that there weren't a lot of kids in that area? Like, how close was the closest friend?
My physically closest friend was about a 20-minute drive away to the closest town near where I went to school. But yeah, I think in reflection, just kind of like as an adult now looking back, I think largely it comes down to my dad being a very insecure person. And I don't think anyone would ever say that if they met him. He's a police officer. He talks tough, and he fills a room with his personality, but he was an immensely insecure person. And I think that his insecurity was almost at a point in his life was almost a degree of self-loathing. And I don't think that you as a parent teach that to your children, but I think you can exude it. And if you don't feel like you have value or measure up to your own standards, even though you don't say it, even though you don't articulate it that way, it comes out. It eventually is picked up on, especially by those closest to you. And I think my insecurity about not knowing how to be a friend, that in a big part, I look to my dad, because I never really saw my dad have close friendships. There was one individual in his life that I would say, yeah, he really loved this person as a friend. And they were partners as police officers. And this man brought out in my dad this side that I didn't see anywhere else. And so there was a friendship there, but it was this guy who was almost like teaching him how to be a friend. And he had this unconditional love for him. Right. And I knew that he saw the flaws in my father, but I could see in him this just kind of unconditionality to their relationship. And I didn't see that anywhere else. And I think that's one of our roles as parents. How we interact with others in front of our children says a lot. It says a lot about the value we see ourselves as having.
No, for sure. I think a lot of what we teach anybody and what we say about ourselves is it's more indirect than it is direct. Like, our actions always say more than our words do. And like the way that you even tonight, were your girls around when you had your tail between your legs, like you said, and you went back to your wife and, you apologized, like whether they were there or not, like if they were there, they're learning more about you, about what it's like to have a healthy, happy relationship from those actions. You didn't tell them anything. You didn't instruct them. You didn't give them a heads up as to what was about to happen, but you did that through your actions, right? Like, what's your earliest memory of learning something from your father in that way? More indirect, more passive, like you saw him do something, you heard him say something?
That's an interesting question, because I would say that generally my dad's personality and my personality are not naturally, similar in personality. So I didn't start out as being a close reflection of Wayne Denis. I actually started out as being a closer reflection of Sherry Denis. We share a lot more similar traits, sure. Like the cliches of like love language and, Enneagram stuff. You're familiar with Enneagram. My mom and I are much closer on the Enneagram than my dad and I would be. So I am a much more subjective learner when it comes to my mom and my interactions. So I picked up a lot of her idiosyncrasies, a lot of her means of communication, a lot of her ways of loving, all kind of were picked up almost passively because our personalities were so much more similar. Right. Whereas my dad, I observed with a lot more objectivity. So early on, I would say even as early as like 8 years old, I was objectively seeing how my dad responded in times of stress and processed it as this is how he responds, not as this is how people respond. I kind of saw him from the outside very, very objectively. And in most of my early observations of his, like the things I learned from him about him were often fairly negative. Because he really struggled with, I don't want to say anger. I think he just spent a lot of his personal life frustrated. And so when he was doing something in his personal life that led to frustration, it resulted in like explosive anger. So he wasn't like abusive or anything like this, but it was a world that collided with mine because I don't respond that way. I don't respond with big words. I don't respond with big expressions of volume and stuff like this, whereas he did. And so I found it scary. And so as a child, that's scary.
That resonates with me. A lot of that is similar to my experiences, a few differences, but I don't remember at what age it was that I started to realize the ways that my father responded to just, daily occurrences wasn't the way that I responded or the way that I wanted to respond. You know what I mean? So I had that kind of an objective lens where I saw him and I was able to kind of internally, kind of evaluate that. Do I want this? Do I like this? Do I respect this? That type of, internal dialogue. I definitely picked up some of his more negative traits, but it was all indirect. Like, there was no choosing, not that I can recall specifically. I do remember thinking that all of the things that he could do just because of where he grew up and how he grew up, he was very comfortable with like hunting, fishing, outdoors activities, right? And that's what my sister and I learned from him. And that was my experience, at least. I feel like that's really all of the positive things that I got from my father. The rest was negative. His outlook on life, I found him to be fairly cynical, fairly pessimistic. I picked up some of that. There was some stubbornness that I had to kind of, weed out. And it's an odd thing. I think one of my earliest memories probably would have been before I was 10 of thinking, I'm not sure that this is someone I really want to spend a whole lot of time with. And that's sad. But yeah, there was definitely a period where I just started to realize that I didn't necessarily want to be there all the time.
Was there, did you go through a period where you wondered what led to the divorce, or was there a period of time where you blamed anyone? What is that like from through a small kid's eyes?
There's a lot of things about life that I've kind of just taken as they've come and haven't gone too deep into thought about them, and that's definitely one of them. Now, later in life, it's obviously something that comes to mind every now and then, and you think it through just because it's a sad aspect of your life. It's sad to have not grown up with a father that I really wanted to respect and admire and be more like. It was kind of the opposite. I had some respect for him, but I felt kind of sympathetic. He lost his father when he was quite young. He was from a large family, didn't have a whole lot of attention. But no, that's not one that I really gave a whole lot of thought to, because that is something that I had conversations with Mom about before she passed, about how they met and why they got together, and how that all happened. And I had obviously been around my father enough to know what he's like, and was raised primarily by my mother and my grandmother, so I knew what my mother was like, and I could see the differences, and it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. As children, we have this odd capacity for grace. Part of the grace is they can come away from some of it unscathed, but also when you feel like you really messed up and you go to your kid and you say, yeah, I'm really sorry I did that or acted that way. They're like, no, that's okay. You're like, oh, I've been stewing on this. I thought I wrecked you. And meanwhile, you're like, oh, they're actually okay. Anyways, my point is that the capacity for children's grace, both actively and passively, is surprising. I went through a period where I lost grace for my dad, where I was like, oh, why was he that way? Maybe in my early 20s. And then in my 30s and later, I was like, oh, he's a flawed human being just like me. Yeah. And actually at his core, I see what he was trying to do. So those Saturdays when he was off work, at the time as a child, when I'm being stunned and overwhelmed by maybe angry outbursts or something. In my 30s now, I can look back and say, okay, he's been underslept now for 2 weeks because he had insomnia. He had afternoon court after working nights. The guy was just burning the candle at both ends. And then on the weekend, our quality time together is changing the fucking bearings on a Dodge Shadow in my parents' driveway so that my mom can go get groceries. That's our quality time together.
Right.
So this build of anger is, I'm underslept. I can't find my tools. I want to spend time with my son who I never see. So I'm going to force his lazy ass to get out of bed at 9:00 in the morning on a Saturday. So now I'm the bad guy because I want to spend time with my son.
Yeah.
And the stupid bolt won't come undone. So boom, my head explodes. And now I look over at my 9-year-old son and he's afraid of me.
Right.
I can't imagine the sadness that would settle on my heart in that moment. But it's all happened. It's all done. The cat's out of the bag. And how do you explain to your 9-year-old son all of those elements? It's not until, I'm 43 years old and I look back, I'm like, yeah, I do the same shit.
Did you have conversations with him about that?
Not with that amount of vulnerability, because he, so much more trauma in his life than I ever could hold a candle to, that even at the late stages of his life, I don't think he was equipped emotionally to have true vulnerable conversation.
Right. Would that be mainly from his work?
Yes and no. There's a lot that I don't know about my dad's early years.
Okay.
But when he was like 10 years old, he was an altar boy in the Catholic Church at the height of child predation in the Catholic Church.
I didn't know that.
My dad has no memories from the time before he was like 10 years old. He has zero memories of his childhood. He has every indication of abuse as a child in terms of being a person who holds high value in strength. He holds high value, like physical strength. He holds high value in personal independence. He was a police officer. He was on the SWAT team. All those things, they're great. And they're indicators of someone with a high degree of drive, but they're also indicators of someone who lacked control of the most fundamental elements of their personhood early on in life.
Right.
So someone who's been abused as a child will very often pursue these kind of career paths because it regains that sense of control over the things they lost in their childhood. His dad was a kind of a piece of shit. He would never say that. He spoke kindly of him, but he had an affair and he was just absent. Never really. He never told him he loved him. Never once. And that was something that struck him to the core. So, anyways,
right.
Long story short, I have a lot of grace for how vulnerable my dad was able to get near the end of his life, but we never really got to the point where we could have a true heart to heart without it going in one direction or another.
Yeah, I'm here nodding my head because there's so many similarities between my story with my father and yours. So many memories coming up just as you're talking. And the first one that comes to mind is when my father was sick, because my father passed from cancer. And when he was basically on his deathbed, the last thing that he said to me was just that life was short. And in the few conversations that we did have, and I shouldn't even call them conversations, he didn't have a whole lot to say the few times that we FaceTimed. It was during COVID. I was disappointed in a way, but I also kind of expected that. Like even with his, his dying, his last few days, it never really occurred to him to try and tell me that, he was sorry for anything. Never made any comments about the relationship with my mother. Wish that could have worked out. Like this is a man that, as far as I know, never had a serious relationship after my mother. I don't even know if he dated. If he did, he didn't tell me, and didn't have much to say to me about, I wish I had been more open with you. I wish I had told you more about my life and, my dreams. You know what I mean? I know very little about what his childhood was like. But yeah, so I expected it. I was still kind of a little bit disappointed, but the same way that you described your father, I had, a bit of sympathy, but also empathy, because I was like, I understand. I get how you were raised. I get how you lost your father when you were young. I get that you're not equipped to have that conversation with me. I can't imagine what he must have felt the few times that I tried to push him a little bit and, get a little bit deeper, try and actually build a relationship. I remember once where I just straight up told him that I don't remember the exact words, but I said something along the lines of like, your best opportunity with me is to try and be my friend, because I'm an adult now. Like I at this point I believe I was in my late 30s when I said this to him, and he was still kind of trying to parent me a little bit, making comments about decisions and things that I was planning. And this is a man who, didn't have post-secondary education, had never really lived outside of the province other than to do a labor job, hadn't pursued women outside of my mother, you know what I mean? So I had surpassed him in almost every single area of life. And yet he was still trying to parent me. And I just said to him, like, Dad, listen, like, I hope you can understand that. Like, this is not me being arrogant and trying to tell you what it's like. What you should do your life like. But if you want to have a relationship with me, you got to recognize that I've done a few things. I've been a few places. Like I've learned a little. I'm in my late 30s now. If you want to be in my life, your best opportunity to do that is to be my friend. Respect my decisions. If you want to question them, like I'll have a conversation with you, but don't push me to the point where it sounds like you actually do know better than I do about the things that I'm.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think he understood the gist of what I was going for, and I think he tried his best to respect that. But honestly, I'm not sure that it really helped too much. Like I think the times that he overstepped were much fewer and far between. But did I get to know him at all? You know what I mean? Like I've known you now since 2000. And, we've had deep conversations, personal conversations, moments where we're both quite open and vulnerable, what's going on in our lives, challenges we faced. And I have other friends like that, right? But my father just didn't know how to become something like that.
So why do you think our fathers, I have my ideas, but like what makes us different, and how did we learn that this was important to have these conversations?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the obvious one is generational, right? The traditional model of masculinity still is, carried forward. It's not as strong as it used to be. But when I say generational, like I'm thinking what was happening back in the late 40s and 50s, what was in the media, what was happening in culture. Like, we're looking at, post World War II. We're looking at, a period of time where men were, well, for one, coming back from war and did not want to talk about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're looking at men are still the breadwinners. Men are still the kind of the leaders of the household. You're looking at a time when religion held a lot more power. And
yeah, even kind of a patriarchal mindset as well,
exactly.
Right? So what I think is probably a common thread there is how our fathers were raised by their fathers. as much as I mourn my relationship with my father, that it wasn't perfect, I look back at my dad and I say, he actually did the absolute best he could with the foundation, the groundwork that he was given by his father. And he actually moved mountains when you compare the two. I have a lot of grace there because I know, man, my dad's dad was miles behind my dad. And my dad would be seen as like having, made a huge leap toward vulnerability by comparison. Whereas I'm that distance again from my own father. But if he hadn't made that leap, I would be my father in this generation today, starting from that baseline. The impact of his father on him led to where I'm at today. And so if we expect growth in the next generation, that's our responsibility. And that's kind of, I think, the point of what you're doing, right? The point of this conversation, the point of this vulnerability that we have today is to say, let's keep this moving. Not that we're so broken that we're a giant mess, but that this is a muscle we have to continue to flex because we see that this has a positive outcome.
Yeah. Well,
right?
You summed it up pretty accurately. That is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I mentioned on the website and when I'm talking about the podcast, when I say conversation, it's the bigger conversation, you know what I mean? That I'm trying to be a part of and trying to push forward. And the main point of that is to keep that going and to keep really an open mind and to remind men, that we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work has been done. We've come a long way. Like even you and I from our fathers and from their fathers, how we've grown, how we have changed our mindset when it comes to, emotional intelligence, when it comes to our relationships with our friends and our partners and what we talk about, what we don't talk about, how we talk about things.
Yeah. And and I know it's not going to make the final cut, but it does make me wonder, if 3 generations back, we were this much of a mess. All right, does it ebb and flow? You know what I mean? Like, does it ebb and flow with social conditions? This damage, the damage to humans, the damage to the fathers, the damage to mothers. Does it ebb and flow with where society is currently at? Because I feel like if we take, the progress from me emotionally, from me to my father to his father, I think you get 2 generations back before that, and you'd be like, how does that human being exist in a world as a human? Because they'd be an absolute piece of shit. You know what I mean? So there must be ebbs and flows of humanity where we get it and then we lose it and then we get it again and then we lose it again and then we get it. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. If we take a couple steps back generationally, it's all relative, right? So like your great-grandfather, my great-grandfather, lived in a time when the expectations were different. What was culturally accepted and expected for men was different. Now, I think those expectations are very much in flux. Like, especially just when it comes to even what a man is. Like, if we told our great grandfathers that, in 100 years or so, there's going to be conversations about what actually makes a man, like what is a man, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that having hindsight where we acknowledge the context that our fathers grew up in is really valuable. Because I think it provides a certain amount of grace for where they ended up.
There's something I want to hear about from you before I kind of bring this to a close. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but What?
You've already taken up too much of my time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm out of wine.
Have you already left a 0 out of 5 star review?
Yeah. How do I Google review this bullshit?
Simpler, more straightforward question. And related to, it doesn't have to be related to your father. What are the challenges that you face now as a father? Is there any relation to how you yourself were fathered, how you were parented, when it comes to how you now parent your 2 children? Like, what are the challenges that you've seen? What's the biggest one that you're even facing right now?
It's hard to.
You have 2 teenagers.
It's hard to.
Right.
Yeah. I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old girls, and I find it's hard to be objective about your own parenting. For me, it is, because my default is to pretty much fall into a position of feeling guilty about everything. And again, and maybe that's how my insecurity has translated to adulthood, is I want to be a great dad. And the way I think that my expectation of the fruit of being a great dad looks is my kids have very little social struggles. They know what they want in life, and they're in a trajectory to obtain it. So to be objective and not blame myself for everything, every negative kind of interaction, I think that my greatest challenge is being patient with the emotional growth of my children and the kind of the self-discovery period that they're going through. And so with that, my tendency is to compare where the development of my friends or peers' children to my own children. Yeah. And it's really not fair. And I'll give you the reason why, is because on the surface, it's very easy for a family to appear like they have a plan, especially when you only see a family with kids every now and then. It's very easy to see the child's progress. It's like, wow, it's leaps and bounds, right? Maybe you're only seeing them once a month. Yeah. But when it's your own family and you see it minute by minute, day by day, you're like, oh my gosh, is this child ever going to get past this hurdle? This struggle they have socially, this struggle they have emotionally, this struggle they have even academically. But I'm sure if I look back to 6 months from now, I'll be like, yeah, they made leaps and bounds. And they're also not interested in things that I'm interested in, but they excel at things that I personally am not interested in. So I'm like, how do I help you be a better dancer? I can't really. But I can encourage you in that direction. So I'm an engineer by trade. I can't sit down next to her and help her. Well, I can, but it would be forced if I sat down next to her and said, we're going to design a robot together using this, this kids robot package is going to be this beautiful moment. That's not really what floats her boat. And so I need to meet her where she's at. It's simple. I can't force her to come to me. I have to go to her. And that's really hard because I'm a fish out of water and I don't know the right words to say. I don't know the thing that's going to make her feel encouraged. And I'm an idiot with that stuff. Yeah.
It's not an opportunity for you to speak from your experience and to share with her from that. You kind of have to take her lead and just jump in where you can. Yeah. And just like kind of be yourself. Right. Yeah. Almost learn from your own child. Yeah.
And also, so it's the same with Ruby. Like she's into volleyball. I'm like, okay, I get sports. I can kind of get engaged in that, but she doesn't want my encouragement in the way that I understand how to give encouragement in sports. So I have to figure that one out too. And then also just recognizing that the love they need doesn't come through me leading them into successes in their pursuits. The the love they need is actually different. The love Lily needs is for me to sit down and read a book with her before the night is over. That's what she needs.
Right.
It doesn't feel like I'm tilling the soil of our relationship there, but that it does feel that way to her. And Ruby, she doesn't need me to force her to do lunges so she can jump higher in volleyball. That's not a love language for her. For her, I don't know, man. She's a pretty confident kid, but I think she just wants to know that she's being heard when she's got something to say, I think. And it's like learning new languages because there's these new people in your world. I look at my dad and like he wanted me to know how much love he was showing me by teaching me how to work on cars. That was a real expression of love from him. Yeah. But to me, it was challenging. It was painful. I didn't want to be doing that on a Saturday. I wanted, I wanted to be watching cartoons. I wanted to be doing these other things. But for him, that was, I'm going to slow down my progress to involve my son. And I think it's healthy for us to look back and say, when was my dad trying to love me that I missed? And then I can acknowledge now and feel loved now. I don't think it's too late.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, like I said, even for my father, like there was periods where I just felt sympathetic, but there's also periods where I could have empathy and I could understand and I could look back and see exactly what you just said, look back and see with a bit of, grace and understanding that he was doing his best. And there were moments where, we connected over things that we did actually have in common, because I did really enjoy a lot of the outdoor activities that he introduced me to, like cross-country skiing was definitely one of them. And I remember maybe a few years before he passed, when he was still healthy, having a beer with him, because I didn't grow up, I grew up very conservatively in a Christian church and Christian family and didn't touch alcohol until years later. Still don't drink very much, but I remember Dad was barbecuing something and we were, my sister and I were at his place, and he asked me if I wanted one, or I think I might have actually went to his fridge in his shed, right, and grabbed one. And so here we were sharing a beer, and he thought it was the coolest thing ever, right? So there was moments like that, because he said, I never thought I'd be sharing a beer with my son, because he always kind of drank, right? But I never did until I was like in my 30s. But what I wanted to say is something else though, in what you were just describing, man, like I've obviously known you for a while, and I've met your children, I've seen you be a father, but what you just described, man, I think you deserve some like just respect for that approach, because even in the way that you describe it, you're talking about putting them first, not so much what you need in those situations, or even what you see it as, how you interpret it. You're looking at those situations from your children's point of view. What is it that they're interested in? What is it that you think they need? And, that's trial and error, and you figure it out, and you ask them and you learn from them. But you're putting yourself in a place where you are vulnerable, because you're trying to do your best. You're trying to figure them out. You're asking questions. You're learning their language, like you said. Mm-hmm. That's impressive, man. I think that's really cool.
But you know what? You articulated it better. And that is my fundamental challenge in parenting, is not putting my needs as a parent, my needs of validation, my needs of this is what it looks like to successfully parent you, ahead of their needs to be properly parented. That is the greatest challenge. And I think you put the words to it. And I appreciate it, but that is the daily struggle, and I fail at it every day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's also common though, right? Like you're not the only one who's experiencing that challenge, and not even just from the parenting standpoint. In all relationships, it can be a challenge, because especially like the different levels of, say, deepness of connection in a relationship. So with someone that you you might see casually every now and then. It's always challenging to be a little bit deeper, to be a little bit more real, to kind of put that person's what they want and what they need first. But when it comes to someone that you're like living with, for me with my fiance, for you with your spouse, like it's sometimes, I think, easier in those situations to put what it is that the other person might want or need first. That I was married before and was divorced, and now I'm engaged, and we're going to be married in July. Both relationships are quite different, and there's many different reasons for why they're quite different. But one of them is that with Dana, I have always felt understood and appreciated, and those are two very different things, but very important to me. I think they're important in pretty much all relationships, but to me, they're my core needs. I've always known that I need someone who not just understands me, but really appreciates how I see the world, how I want to interact with the world, what it is that I want from the world, and what it is that I want to give back, and why. You know what I mean? All these big, deep, because I'm an Enneagram 4. You know what I mean? And I don't think that way because I am an Enneagram 4. I'm an Enneagram 4 because I think that way. I use these personality tests just to, as tools to help me understand myself better. But that's kind of what I'm saying, is that with Dana, it is so much easier for me to put what it is that I think she might need or want first, because I know that at the end of the day, she's going to do the exact same thing for me. And she always has, the patience, the grace, whatever it is really that I might need in moments when maybe I'm the one that is like not feeling myself. But it's so much easier to put her needs, her wants first when I know that this is someone that I'm, loved unconditionally by, that I'm appreciated, and that in my, lower moments, she's got me. And it's because she loves me, appreciates me, understands me, not just because she's in a committed relationship or she's got my ring on her finger. You know what I mean? And that's a beautiful thing. And that's what I've always appreciated about you and I, actually. Like, I think you and I, we get each other. And I don't want to bring up something like overly emotional, but like you wrote me a bit of a love letter when I left Edmonton back in the day.
I do that every now and then.
Well, but dude, like I still have that, and because I appreciate that about you and I. Like it was just a card, and you basically said something along the lines of, some people just don't get me, and that I did, and as someone who finds that as very important to me, being understood and appreciated just for who I am, that's why I kept that. But I mean, I think that's a super important thing for all relationships. So the fact that you're doing that with your kids, I mean, it's fundamental, and they're going to learn that from you. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're going to see that from you.
And it takes time, right? Like, we don't see the evidence of it, I think, until quite late with kids. And I think that's part of the beautiful part of parenting, is how it it does refine that, like what you have with Dana, the unconditional love and the beauty of it. It's incredible when you have these two people committed to the relationship, and then when you bring these little people in who don't reciprocate necessarily, but you've refined one another as partners to understand what humble and unconditional love can look like. It's an additional phase that's going to add to the relationship and say, okay, now that I know how to love unconditionally, I'm going to love this little creature unconditionally who is, going to complain when I make this beautiful meal. They're going to find some reason to offend my inner child that says, oh, I actually wanted to be validated there. Why are you not validating me? And that It's painful. It's immensely painful, but it's also immensely beautiful, and that's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
And even with our fathers, the way I love my dad has taught me so much about how love works. It's taught me so much about unconditional love.
Yeah.
From his perspective, from my perspective. And the outcome is that even though he's passed away, our relationship can still continue to heal. And the richness of our relationship can still be greater. It doesn't end when he passed away. There's still more richness to be had as I begin to understand more about the person that he was and how much selflessness was represented by even the strained portions of our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I have fond memories of your father. I mean, obviously folks who are listening wouldn't be aware that, you know, you and I have met in 2000, and there was a period where my student loans weren't processed properly. Basically, I was without funding for, I believe it was, I don't know if it was a full year. It was at least a semester. And your folks just took me in. Like, your sister was living elsewhere at the time. So I basically moved into her bedroom and became part of your family for like at least 4 or 5 months. And it was fantastic. But I think your father, more than anything in that period of time, was kind of loving me by giving me that supportive structure. Because he did have one conversation with me that I can at least remember, where he just kind of wanted to like make sure that I was aware of what was happening, and, you know, what the expectations were, and you know, and then I repaid you guys by waking you up at like 2:30, 3 in the morning by trying to stoke the fire. You guys remember that?
Oh yeah, because we heated our house with wood.
Yeah, your house was heated with wood.
I actually am a pioneer from 1850.
Yeah, I was up late cramming for an exam, and, you know, the fire had gone out. I was freezing cold, and went down to try and stoke that thing and dropped the log, and didn't wake anybody. I didn't hear it in the moment, but I heard it in the morning. And you were the one to bring it up.
Fuck was hell.
Yeah. It's just random memories coming back to me now from the Denis family acreage. Learning to drive. What car was it that you had that I learned to drive stick on?
Oh God. Were you driving stick?
Well, that's how I learned to drive stick. Wasn't it a Daytona or something?
It was a Dodge Charger. You learned to drive stick on that?
Yeah, man. Buddy, I had never driven a standard in my life. Drove yours once, then went and bought my Jetta.
The TDI.
Which was the standard. And I don't know if the sales guy that hopped in the car with Andy and I don't know if he knew. I don't know if he had thoughts about like, oh my God, like this guy is going to just destroy the gearbox in this like slightly used vehicle.
That's amazing.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found some value in this episode. If you have, be sure to share the Akkeri Podcast with a friend and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You can find the Akkeri on socials at The Akkeri and on the web at theakkeri.com. We're still recording. Careful. I could just like remix any of this.
I love it. When is the sequel?
The sequel is July. You're referring to the elopement, the marriage?
No, for...
Well, I don't know what else you're talking about. The sequel of what? There's only one thing in my life that there's two of it that I can think of. What do you mean the podcast? This is like
sequel to our podcast. When are we going to do number 2? Not the sequel of your marriage.
When you say sequel, I assume that's what you meant. What the fuck else would he be talking about? Well,
I love that. That's what I'm going to call it. A New Hope.
Yeah. Help me, Obi-Wan.
I don't even have your website.
Good God. You are the worst.
Shit, friend.
Do you even know how to spell Akkeri?
What?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Awkward?
Awkward, yeah. It's theawkward.com, theawkwardpodcast.com, because that's what it feels like right now. Akkeri, Akkeri. This is not going to make the cut.
What does Akkeri mean?
You haven't even listened to the first episode. You asshole.
You never gave me any of this information.
What do you mean? Am I supposed to text you and give you all the links and ensure that you're properly subscribed and you know how to use your smartphone?
Akkeri Scientific Consultants, is that you?
I don't think so. It's theakkeri.com. Akkeri is Akkeri, and Akkeri is a Norse word for anchor.
AKKE.
AKK.
KK.
Yeah. AKKERI. Theakkeri.com.
I can't believe what an absolute piece of shit I am.
Yeah.
Oh, look at you. You're a handsome son of a bitch.
You're pumping your tires, telling you you're a good father, a good friend.
I bookmarked it. Oh, I love this. Okay, I'm going to read.
Yeah, have a look.
To read through this. I'm kind of a big deal on LinkedIn, so I'll share it on there.
I'm kind of a big deal on LinkedIn.
That's
how I'm going to introduce you at the beginning of the podcast. This is my buddy Matt Denis. For those of you who don't know, he's kind of a big deal on LinkedIn.
He's a CEO of something like everyone else. Thanks, buddy. Thanks for including me.
Of course. You were top on the list.
All right. Gotta go.
Okay.
Gotta go see my bride, see if she still knows I'm here. Have a good night, my friend.
All right, brother. I appreciate it. Love you, man. See you later.
Later.